The hall was buzzing with energy, filled with people who loved music. Soft lights reflected off polished floors, and the scent of fresh flowers from the stage filled the room. Everyone was excited because a famous pianist was visiting. He was known all over the world, not just for his skill but for his sharp tongue. People admired his talent, but they also knew he could be cruel to anyone he thought was not worthy. Among the crowd was a simple woman. She was not dressed in expensive clothes, and she did not carry herself with the kind of confidence that usually turned heads. Her eyes, however, shone with excitement and a quiet determination. She loved music more than anything, and even though she did not have formal training like the others, she had practiced every day for years. Music was her world, and she carried a notebook filled with compositions she had created on her own. Today, she was only there to listen, to feel the music, and to be inspired. The famous pianist walked onto the stage with a graceful air, acknowledging the crowd with a smile that seemed polite but distant. He looked around, his eyes sharp and calculating, as if measuring everyone present. Then he noticed her. At first, he barely paid attention, but when someone pointed to her and whispered her name, he chuckled softly. She seemed so ordinary, so small in a world full of people dressed in fine attire. He leaned over to a colleague and muttered something that made the corners of his mouth twist in a sneer. The woman heard nothing, but she felt the weight of his gaze. She could sense that he did not expect much from her, and that only made her heart beat faster. There was something about the way he looked at people, as if he could see their weaknesses instantly. But she reminded herself that she loved music, and no one could take that away from her. As the pianist began to play, the room filled with beautiful sounds. The notes floated through the air like a gentle breeze, and the audience was mesmerized. His skill was undeniable. Fingers flew over the keys, producing music that seemed impossible for anyone else to play. The woman watched, her hands resting lightly on her lap, imagining her own fingers on a piano. She closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, feeling both awe and a quiet challenge rising inside her. After a few pieces, the pianist paused and looked around the audience with a critical eye. He seemed to enjoy the attention, soaking in every gaze and every whisper. Then his eyes returned to her. He had noticed her several times now, and there was a hint of amusement in his expression. Perhaps he was wondering why someone so ordinary would attend an event like this, and he seemed to think it was amusing that she might try to play. The woman, sensing his attention, felt a mix of fear and excitement. She knew he was a master, and the idea that he could judge her even before hearing her play was daunting. But she also knew that her love for music was stronger than any fear. She wanted to show, even if only to herself, that her passion could stand in a room filled with such talent. People began to whisper, noticing the silent interaction. Some of the audience looked curious, some judgmental. The woman noticed their glances but chose to focus on the music and her own heartbeat. She reminded herself that music was about feeling, not appearances. She had learned that in countless hours alone, pressing keys, hearing melodies in her mind, and making them real with her hands. The pianist finished his performance, rising from the bench to applause and cheers. His eyes scanned the room again, lingering for a moment on the woman. He smirked, a small, sharp expression that spoke of his confidence and perhaps his dismissal of her. Then he moved towards the side stage, speaking quietly to assistants and laughing at something only they understood. She could feel the tension in the room, the sense that something unusual was about to happen, though she did not yet know what. A moment later, he turned back to the audience and announced, with a voice that carried authority, that he would demonstrate a new piece he had been practicing. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. She watched carefully, not to interrupt but to learn. Every movement of his hands, every expression on his face, taught her something about the world of professional music that she had never seen up close. She felt small, yet she felt inspired. As he played, he noticed her scribbling something in a small notebook she had pulled from her bag. He raised an eyebrow, curious. It was unusual, he thought, for someone to write during a performance. Most people simply listened. His eyes narrowed slightly, and a small smirk appeared. Perhaps he thought she was copying, Or perhaps he thought she was foolish enough to believe she could ever play at his level. He leaned back and let the last notes hang in the air, then walked down from the stage with a hint of amusement and challenge in his step. The woman closed her notebook gently. She had not been copying. She had been writing down ideas inspired by his music, melodies that had come to her mind in the flow of the performance. She looked at him briefly, noting the confident, almost mocking look on his face. It stirred something in her. She felt a fire inside that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with determination. She had come to enjoy music, to learn, and to dream. She had never imagined anyone would laugh at her love for it. And yet, here was a man, one of the most celebrated musicians in the world, clearly thinking she was insignificant. Instead of shrinking, she felt a strange mix of excitement and courage. She wanted to play, to let her music speak when words could not. The crowd started to settle, chatting softly among themselves about the performance. Some were impressed, some whispered about the woman. She noticed the whispers, but she chose not to focus on them. Her heart was beating faster, not from embarrassment but from a growing sense of purpose. She imagined herself at the piano, hands on the keys, letting every note flow just as she had practiced for years alone. She imagined the music filling the room, touching hearts, and perhaps astonishing even those who doubted her. The pianist finally turned fully to face the audience again, and for the first time, he addressed the woman directly, his voice carrying over the soft hum of conversation. He spoke casually, almost teasing, asking if she had ever played in front of a crowd before. The question was meant to mock, to highlight the gap between his world and hers. Yet the woman did not shrink. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her response was calm, quiet, but full of the confidence that only someone who truly loved music could feel. She admitted she had not, but she loved to play and was eager to try. A few people in the audience gasped softly. The famous pianist's smirk widened, clearly expecting a poor performance. He had assumed that someone so ordinary could not possibly hold a candle to him. But the woman, with her quiet determination and genuine love for music, was about to prove that appearances could be deceiving. In that moment, the room was silent, full of anticipation and tension. The woman walked slowly to the piano at the front, her hands trembling slightly but her mind focused. She could hear the soft rustle of the audience, the whispers, the barely contained laughter of some. She ignored it all. She was not there to prove anything to anyone else. She was there to let her music speak for her, to show that passion, dedication, and heart could surpass even the sharpest judgment. As she settled onto the bench and placed her hands on the keys, the pianist watched her closely, his expression a mixture of curiosity and amusement. He had expected an easy laugh, an embarrassing failure. Instead, he found himself facing someone whose presence alone carried a quiet strength. He could not yet hear the music, but he could sense the intent, the dedication, and the heart behind it. And in that sense, the first chapter of an unforgettable story had begun, one that would soon astonish everyone present. The woman sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, feeling the cool touch of the polished surface. The hall had gone silent, every eye focused on her. She could feel the weight of their gazes, some curious, some doubtful, and some openly mocking. Yet, she did not let it shake her. She reminded herself that music was her refuge, her voice when words could not speak. This was her moment, and she intended to make it count. The famous pianist leaned back slightly, smirking. He had expected someone nervous and clumsy, someone who would fumble or hesitate under the pressure of a real audience. Instead, he saw a calm, determined figure. It annoyed him in a way he could not hide. He whispered to a colleague, a tone of amusement in his voice, suggesting that this would be easy entertainment. He had no idea what was about to happen. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost shy yet carefully placed. They were simple, not flashy, but each note carried emotion, telling a story without words. The audience listened, some frowning, expecting the mistakes that never came. Her fingers moved with grace, guided by years of quiet practice and deep passion. There was an honesty to her playing that no amount of formal training could teach. As the melody unfolded, it became more intricate. The simple tune she had begun with slowly developed into something richer, a flowing composition that seemed far beyond what anyone expected. Every chord, every subtle shift in rhythm, showed her understanding of music not as technique alone, but as feeling, as life itself. People began to lean forward, drawn in by the unexpected depth of her performance. The famous pianist watched, his amusement fading into surprise, then something that looked almost like disbelief. His eyes followed her hands, the precise movements, the natural elegance of her touch on the keys. How could someone so simple, so unassuming, play with such understanding and heart? It was not skill alone that captivated him, but the raw emotion, the honesty, the way her music seemed to speak directly to everyone in the hall. He tried to hide it, turning slightly, masking his astonishment with a polite nod. But even he could not deny the growing murmurs of admiration from the audience. Whispers spread, soft at first, then stronger, as people realized that they were witnessing something remarkable. The woman was not just playing notes. She was telling a story, sharing a part of herself that words could never capture. Her fingers danced over the keys, and the music seemed to breathe, filling every corner of the room. Some in the audience exchanged glances, unable to believe what they were hearing. They had come expecting a quiet, perhaps awkward performance, a brief interlude before the main show. Instead, they were captivated, listening intently to a talent that had been hiding in plain sight. There was something magical about her playing, a charm that went beyond the technical and reached straight into the heart. The famous pianist could not help himself. He leaned forward slightly, studying her more closely. He noticed the little details, the careful phrasing, the subtle dynamics that made the music alive. He realized that her simplicity was not weakness, but purity. She did not rely on showy tricks or rapid scales to impress. She relied on something far more powerful, the honesty of her music and the strength of her spirit. Each note she played seemed to challenge his assumptions, reminding him that talent could come from the most unexpected places. Her hands moved faster now, not recklessly, but with a confidence born from years of private practice. The simple melody from the beginning had transformed into a piece of intricate beauty, with harmonies and shifts that seemed almost instinctive. The audience held their breath, enchanted by the unfolding music. Even the staff and organizers at the event were watching with growing awe, whispering among themselves that no one could have expected this. She glanced briefly at the famous pianist, who was now sitting forward, his expression unreadable. For the first time, she felt a sense of equality in the room. She knew she was not competing, not trying to prove herself to him or anyone else, but there was a quiet satisfaction in seeing that even he could not ignore her skill. She let the music guide her, pouring every ounce of feeling into the notes, letting the piano become an extension of herself. The crowd could feel it too. Their initial skepticism was giving way to admiration. People who had doubted her talent were now nodding, smiling, and in some cases, holding back tears. There was a magic in the way she played, a connection that transcended appearances and expectations. Everyone realized that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a moment that would remain in their memories long after the last note had faded. The famous pianist's hands itched to join, to show that he could do this better, faster, more brilliantly. But deep down, he understood that this was not about speed or technical mastery alone. It was about heart, soul, and the courage to step forward despite fear and doubt. She had all of that in abundance, and he could not compete with it in this moment. As the music reached its peak, the woman closed her eyes, letting herself be carried by the melody. She did not see the audience, did not see the pianist. She only felt the music flowing through her, shaping the air, touching hearts. Every chord struck with intention, every pause filled with emotion. She had never felt more alive, more connected to something bigger than herself. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, the hall was still for a heartbeat, as if no one could believe what they had just experienced. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started quietly, a ripple of appreciation. then grew into a wave of clapping, cheering, and even shouting. People rose to their feet, unable to contain their amazement. The simple woman had transformed the room, proving that talent and courage could shatter expectations. The famous pianist sat frozen for a moment, his usual composure shaken. He had expected to entertain, to amuse, perhaps even ridicule. Instead, he had witnessed something he could not ignore, something that humbled him. He had misjudged her based on her appearance, her background, and her modest demeanor. He realized that true artistry was not about arrogance or status, but about heart and dedication. The woman opened her eyes and looked at the audience. She saw admiration, surprise, and respect in their faces. She also saw the pianist, who now regarded her with something close to awe. She smiled quietly, not out of triumph, but from a deep sense of fulfillment. She had shared her music, and it had touched everyone in the room. The laughter and mockery of before had vanished, replaced by genuine appreciation and a newfound understanding. As she stood and stepped back from the piano, people continued to applaud. Some approached her to offer compliments, their voices full of wonder and admiration. She thanked them humbly, her heart still racing, knowing that she had done more than just play notes. She had shown courage, faced judgment, and let her passion shine despite the fear. The famous pianist rose as well, not to dismiss her, but to acknowledge the brilliance he could not deny. There was a quiet nod, a moment of recognition, that spoke volumes more than words ever could. In that instant, the hierarchy of arrogance and fame was challenged, and the power of humility and dedication was made clear. The woman gathered her things, feeling lighter than she had in years. She had stepped into a world that had seemed intimidating, faced ridicule and doubt, and come out not just unscathed but victorious. She knew that this was only the beginning, that her journey would continue, but she had proven something important. Passion, talent, and courage could overcome fear, mockery, and expectation. As she left the hall, people continued to talk about the performance, their voices filled with excitement and disbelief. She walked slowly, savoring the moment, the memory of every note, every chord, every emotion that had passed through her fingers. The experience had changed her, given her confidence, and made her realize that music at its purest was about heart and soul, not appearances or judgment. The pianist lingered behind, replaying the performance in his mind. He could not stop thinking about the unexpected talent he had witnessed. His arrogance had been confronted, and for the first time in a long time he felt humbled. He understood, in a deep and quiet way, that the true measure of a musician was not in fame or recognition, but in the honesty and passion they brought to their music. And the woman, simple and unassuming, had shown him exactly that. The room was filled with a quiet tension, as if the air itself were waiting for the next moment. The woman had finished her first piece, and the audience was still recovering from the surprise of her skill. Some were whispering to one another, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. The famous pianist, who had once been so confident, now seemed unsettled, a rare expression of uncertainty crossing his face. She took a deep breath and approached the piano again, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers. This time, she was not just playing. She was speaking through the instrument. Her emotions guided her hands, every note shaped by the memories, struggles, and quiet determination that had defined her journey with music. She did not look at the audience or the famous pianist. She did not need to. The music carried her own voice, and that was enough. As her fingers began to move, the first notes were soft, like whispers. Then, slowly, the melody grew, weaving a story that captured the room. Each chord, each subtle pause, added depth and color. It was not just a display of technical skill. It was a narrative, a journey that anyone listening could feel. People leaned forward in their seats, drawn into the world she was creating, mesmerized by the honesty and emotion in her playing. The famous pianist watched intently. His initial amusement had disappeared, replaced by an intense focus. He had seen many talented musicians, but something about her performance was different. It was not just about the music she played. it was the way she played it. The way she poured herself into each note. The sincerity and courage in every gesture. He felt a pang of respect, a feeling he had long forgotten in his pursuit of perfection and fame. Her melody began to build, flowing from soft, reflective passages to strong, commanding notes. She played with confidence and subtlety, balancing emotion with control. Every movement of her hands seemed natural, effortless, yet precise. The audience could sense the hours of dedication, the countless nights spent practicing alone, and the love she had for her craft. The hall was completely silent except for the music, every person captivated, hanging on to every sound. Some members of the audience felt chills run down their spines. They had expected a simple, unremarkable performance, but instead, they were experiencing a story told entirely through music. A few whispered to one another, amazed that someone so unassuming could command attention in such a powerful way. Others simply sat, eyes wide, unable to move, as if afraid that even the slightest distraction might break the spell she had cast. The famous pianist, now leaning slightly forward, could not tear his eyes away. He studied the way her hands moved, the way her body swayed slightly in time with the music. He realized that her simplicity was her strength, that her unpretentious nature allowed her to create something that no one had expected. He had underestimated her, and it stung. He had thought he could judge her, dismiss her, and yet here she was, dominating the room with nothing but talent and heart. As the piece progressed, she introduced subtle variations and harmonies, creating layers of sound that seemed to speak directly to the emotions of the audience. The music was no longer just notes. It was a living, breathing entity, drawing people into her world. Tears formed in the eyes of some listeners, moved by the beauty and honesty of her performance. Others clutched their hands together, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling she conveyed. Even the staff who had been busy organizing the event stopped, captivated by the unexpected brilliance. The pianist's usual sense of control and superiority began to falter. He had faced many competitions, seen countless performers, and yet he had never felt quite like this. He could not analyze or criticize. There was no room for arrogance here. Her music had stripped away all pretenses and forced him to confront something he had long avoided: the raw power of authenticity and dedication. The woman, unaware of the inner conflict she had stirred in him, continued to play. Her melody rose and fell, gentle then powerful, like waves on a shore. Each note carried intention and purpose, telling a story of struggle, hope, and resilience. She moved seamlessly between moments of softness and intensity, never forcing the music, letting it flow naturally from her heart. The audience was spellbound, completely absorbed in the emotions she expressed. A few people in the crowd tried to whisper to one another, attempting to describe what they were feeling, but words failed them. There was a sense that this performance was more than just music. It was a message, a revelation. The woman's courage to step forward, to play despite doubt and mockery, resonated deeply. People felt inspired, touched not just by the skill but by the bravery and honesty behind it. The famous pianist, who had once seemed untouchable, found himself reflecting on his own behavior. He had laughed, he had judged, he had assumed superiority. Now he understood that talent could not be measured by appearances or status, could not be dismissed with a smirk. He had underestimated her, and the realization was humbling. He felt a strange mix of admiration and regret, recognizing that true mastery was not just in technique but in heart. The woman's performance reached a crescendo, a powerful moment where every note seemed to shine. The hall was filled with sound and emotion, a combination that left no one unmoved. Her hands moved rapidly, yet with precision, creating a sense of urgency and intensity. The music seemed to lift the audience, carrying them along the journey she had created. There was a sense of unity, as if everyone present were experiencing the story together, connected by her gift. Then, slowly, she began to draw the piece to a close. The rapid notes softened, the harmonies became gentle, and the melody faded like a whisper. The last note lingered in the air, a delicate echo that seemed to hang over the hall. Silence followed, thick and heavy, as if no one could quite believe what had just happened. The audience held their breath, reluctant to break the spell, unsure of how to respond to such an extraordinary display. Finally, applause erupted. It started softly, a ripple of hands clapping, then grew into a roaring wave of appreciation. People rose to their feet, cheering and shouting, expressing their astonishment. Some wiped tears from their eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty and honesty they had witnessed. The hall was alive with excitement, admiration, and respect. The woman stood quietly, bowing humbly, her face glowing with a mix of pride and relief. She had shared her heart through music, and it had been received in full. The famous pianist, for his part, remained still for a moment, absorbing the scene. He had expected a simple, forgettable performance, but he had witnessed something extraordinary. He realized that his arrogance and assumptions had blinded him to the true nature of talent and dedication. He nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of her brilliance, a rare gesture of humility. In that instant, he understood that she had not only challenged him but also reminded everyone present of the power of authenticity and courage. The woman gathered her things, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had stepped into a world that had seemed intimidating, faced judgment and mockery, and emerged with her music unscathed, even celebrated. Her heart swelled with pride, not for fame or recognition, but for the realization that her passion and dedication could create such an impact. She had turned fear into courage and doubt into art. As she walked away from the piano, people continued to speak in hushed tones, expressing wonder and admiration. Some approached her to offer praise, their words heartfelt and sincere. She thanked them quietly, her humility shining through. She knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, that there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew that she had proven something important, not just to the audience or the famous pianist, but to herself. The famous pianist lingered, reflecting on what he had seen. He realized that he had been reminded of something essential, that music at its core was not about competition, arrogance, or showmanship. It was about heart, soul, and the courage to express oneself fully. He had witnessed a rare and beautiful talent, someone who played not to impress, but to share a piece of herself with the world. And in that moment he felt both humbled and inspired. The woman left the stage, carrying with her a quiet confidence and a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced doubt and judgment, and her music had spoken louder than any words could. She had shown that true talent and passion cannot be hidden or dismissed, and that courage and dedication can create moments of beauty that touch the hearts of many. Her story was only beginning, but the memory of this performance would remain, both in her heart and in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. The applause continued to echo through the hall as the woman rose from the piano. Her heart was still pounding, but not from fear. It was from the thrill of having shared a part of herself that had always lived quietly in her music. She felt a warmth spread through her, a deep satisfaction that came not from the attention, but from the knowledge that she had stayed true to herself and her passion. The audience's astonishment was evident, but it only made her more aware of the courage it had taken to sit at that piano and play. People were still on their feet, clapping, cheering, and expressing amazement at the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. Some approached her cautiously, almost reverently, wanting to offer praise. Their words were full of wonder and admiration. She smiled and thanked them quietly, her humility evident in every gesture. She had never imagined that playing music for the joy of it could create such a profound impact. And yet, here she was, standing in a hall full of people who had once doubted her. The famous pianist, who had initially smirked and expected an easy laugh, now sat silently, trying to process what had just occurred. His usual confidence and poise had been shaken. He had seen countless performers, yet he had never felt the weight of such genuine emotion conveyed through music. The realization hit him hard. He had misjudged her based on her appearance, her simplicity, and her modest demeanor. He had been arrogant, and now he understood the lesson that had been presented before him in the form of music. Some members of the audience approached the stage, eager to meet the woman, to shake her hand, and to express their amazement. She welcomed their attention with quiet grace, speaking softly but confidently. She explained that she had simply followed her love for music, letting it guide her fingers and her heart. There was no showmanship, no intent to compete, only the desire to express herself and share what she had learned and created in countless private hours. The sincerity of her words only deepened the audience's admiration. The famous pianist finally stood, moving toward her. He paused briefly, taking a deep breath, and then spoke. His voice was calm, lacking its usual edge of superiority. He admitted that he had underestimated her, that he had assumed she would be timid and unskilled. He acknowledged the depth, emotion, and authenticity of her performance, admitting that it had humbled him. The words were sincere, and the acknowledgement from someone of his stature made the moment even more powerful. She nodded quietly, accepting his recognition without pride or arrogance. There was no need to boast. The music had already spoken. The exchange between them, simple as it was, carried a weight of respect and understanding. The hall seemed to settle into a calm admiration, a collective recognition that something extraordinary had just taken place. It was more than a performance. It was a lesson about courage, authenticity, and the unexpected power of talent. As she gathered her sheet music and notes, she noticed the faces of people around her, filled with admiration and awe. They were speaking in hushed tones, sharing their astonishment with each other. Some were discussing the subtle nuances of her performance, the way she had transitioned between soft, tender passages and intense, dramatic sections. Others marveled at the emotional depth, the connection she had created between her music and the hearts of everyone present. It was clear that her performance had left a lasting impression. The famous pianist watched quietly, reflecting on the experience. He had spent years mastering technique and performance, yet he had been reminded that true mastery went beyond technical skill. It was about heart, soul, and the courage to express oneself fully. The woman had displayed all of these qualities in abundance, and it was a lesson he would carry with him from that day forward. His previous arrogance seemed small and unimportant in comparison to the authenticity and passion she had shown. Some audience members were still lingering near the piano, not wanting to leave. They wanted to savor the moment a little longer, to discuss quietly among themselves what they had witnessed. Her music had created a shared experience, connecting everyone in the hall through emotion and understanding. People who had never known her before felt a sense of admiration and respect that went beyond the typical response to a performance. They had been touched by something rare and genuine. She remained calm, moving with purpose yet without haste, collecting her belongings and offering quiet smiles to those who spoke to her. There was no arrogance in her demeanor, only a quiet strength that came from knowing she had stayed true to herself. The humility she displayed made her achievement all the more impressive. People left the hall talking about her, not just about her talent, but about the courage, passion, and authenticity that had made the performance unforgettable. The famous pianist lingered behind, replaying every note and every gesture in his mind. He had entered the hall expecting to entertain, to demonstrate skill, perhaps even to ridicule. Instead, he had witnessed a story, a journey told entirely through music, and he had been humbled by it. He realized that the woman's performance had shown a rare kind of power, one that could not be taught or bought, one that came from dedication, honesty, and heart. In the quiet moments after the applause, the hall began to empty, but the energy of the performance remained. People continued to speak in hushed tones, recounting what they had felt and seen. The impact of her music was not fading. It was lingering, creating a sense of inspiration and wonder. The woman moved through the crowd, noticing smiles, nods, and expressions of respect. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had shared something meaningful, something that had touched hearts. The famous pianist finally approached her once more. His voice was steady, but there was a new warmth in it. He expressed his admiration not just for her skill, but for her courage in facing doubt and judgment. He admitted that he had learned something important from her, something he had overlooked in his own career. The acknowledgement was sincere, and it carried the weight of experience and reflection. It was more than recognition. It was a moment of genuine respect and understanding. She listened quietly, her expression calm and composed. She accepted his words without arrogance, knowing that her music had already spoken louder than any compliment. The exchange between them was brief but powerful, a reminder that talent and heart could overcome assumptions, mockery, and expectations. The moment was a testament to the transformative power of music and the courage it took to share one's gift openly. As she left the stage and walked through the hall, people continued to look at her with admiration. Some stopped to shake her hand, others simply nodded, acknowledging the impact she had made. She smiled softly, grateful for their recognition, but more importantly, grateful for the experience itself. She had faced doubt, stepped into a challenging situation, and emerged with her music unscathed and celebrated. It was a victory that went beyond applause. It was a personal triumph of courage, dedication, and authenticity. The famous pianist watched from a distance, reflecting on the lessons of the day. He realized that his previous assumptions, based on appearances and status, had been misguided. He had encountered a talent that defied expectation, someone who had used music to express not just skill, but emotion, courage, and heart. He understood that true artistry was not about fame, recognition, or arrogance. It was about authenticity and the willingness to share oneself fully. The woman left the hall, carrying with her a quiet confidence and a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her journey was just beginning, but she also knew that she had proven something important, to herself, to the audience, and even to the famous pianist. She had shown that passion and dedication could overcome doubt and mockery, and that true talent could emerge from unexpected places. The experience had changed her, giving her courage, humility, and a deeper understanding of her own potential. The audience, still buzzing with excitement and admiration, slowly dispersed, carrying with them the memory of a performance that had exceeded all expectations. People spoke of her music, her courage, and the way she had transformed a room with her talent and heart. The impact of her performance would linger long after the event, inspiring others and reminding them that true artistry is not measured by appearance or status, but by passion, dedication, and the courage to express oneself fully. The woman stepped out of the hall into the cool evening air, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and quiet pride. The performance had ended, but the impact lingered like a soft echo in her mind. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and the watchful eyes of a room full of people who had expected little from her. And yet, she had played, and her music had spoken louder than any words ever could. The memory of the applause and the faces filled with astonishment would stay with her forever. As she walked down the steps, she noticed groups of people still talking about her performance. Some were recounting the music note by note, impressed by the intricacy and emotion she had conveyed. Others spoke of her courage, of the bravery it took to stand at the piano in front of such a distinguished audience, including the famous pianist himself. It was clear that her performance had not only entertained but also inspired, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had been present. The famous pianist followed her quietly from a distance, reflecting on what had happened. He had always believed that skill alone could command attention and respect, but today he had witnessed something far more profound. It was not just about technique or speed. It was about heart, authenticity, and courage. He had underestimated her, assuming her simplicity meant lack of talent, and now he was humbled by the realization that true artistry could come from anywhere, from anyone willing to dedicate themselves fully to their craft. She made her way to a quiet corner of the venue, gathering her thoughts and allowing herself a moment of solitude. The adrenaline that had carried her through the performance was slowly ebbing, leaving a calm sense of satisfaction. She thought about the countless hours she had spent practicing alone, the late nights and early mornings, the moments of doubt when she questioned whether her efforts would ever be enough. All of those moments had led to this, a chance to express herself fully and to share her love for music with others. People continued to approach her, some shaking her hand, others offering words of encouragement. Each compliment was met with a gentle smile and a humble acknowledgement. She was not seeking recognition or fame. She simply loved music and wanted to share it. Yet, the respect and admiration of others was a welcome affirmation that passion, courage, and dedication could indeed be seen and felt by others. The famous pianist finally approached, his expression softened by the humility of the experience. He extended a hand, not as a gesture of superiority, but as a genuine acknowledgement of her talent and courage. He admitted that he had been wrong to judge her, that he had expected an unremarkable performance and had instead witnessed something extraordinary. His words were sincere, carrying the weight of someone who had long been respected for his skill and experience, yet had learned an unexpected lesson in humility. She accepted his acknowledgement with a quiet nod, feeling a sense of mutual respect between them. There was no need for boastfulness or competition. The music had spoken for her, and it had touched everyone present. The interaction was simple, yet profound, a moment of understanding between two people from very different worlds who shared a common language: music. As she prepared to leave the venue, she reflected on what had just happened. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and judgment, yet she had allowed herself to trust in her abilities and her passion. The performance had not only demonstrated her skill, but had also conveyed her authenticity, her heart, and her dedication. It was a reminder that true talent could not be measured by appearances, and that courage and perseverance could lead to moments of profound impact. Outside, the evening was calm, the streets quiet, and the air fresh. She walked slowly, savoring the sense of accomplishment that filled her chest. Each step was lighter than the last, as if the weight of doubt and insecurity had been lifted. She thought about the future, about the opportunities that might now open, but also about the lessons she had learned. Recognition and applause were gratifying, but they were not the purpose of her music. Her love for it, her dedication to improvement, and her courage to express herself were the true rewards. The famous pianist lingered nearby, reflecting on the day's events. He understood that his previous arrogance had blinded him to the depth and authenticity of other people's talents. Seeing her perform had reminded him of the humility and passion that are essential in any art form. He felt inspired, not by the desire to outperform, but by the realization that talent could emerge in unexpected ways, and that true artistry was a combination of skill, heart, and courage. As she continued walking, she began to think about the impact she could have on others. Her story, her performance, and her courage could serve as inspiration for those who doubted themselves, who feared stepping into a world where they felt out of place. She realized that music was not only a personal passion but also a tool for connection and inspiration. It could reach hearts, inspire dreams, and change perceptions, just as it had done for the audience and the famous pianist. The next few days were filled with messages, invitations, and opportunities to perform again. People were eager to hear her music, to experience the honesty and emotion she brought to each note. While the attention was new and unexpected, she approached it with the same humility and dedication that had always guided her. She understood that the recognition was secondary to the joy of creating and sharing music, and she remained focused on her true purpose, expressing herself fully and connecting with others through her art. The famous pianist, now reflecting more deeply, reached out to her, offering words of encouragement and support. He had been reminded of the essential qualities that make a musician truly exceptional: authenticity, passion, and courage. Their brief interactions, both on stage and afterward, had created a mutual understanding, a recognition that true talent could not be measured by reputation or appearance. His acknowledgement was both humbling and inspiring, reinforcing the lesson that she had already learned through her performance. Over time, her music reached more people, not through fame or competition, but through genuine appreciation and admiration. She continued to play, teach, and share her love for music with anyone willing to listen. Each performance was approached with the same sincerity and dedication, a reflection of her character and her respect for the art. Audiences were moved not only by her skill but by the courage and authenticity that had defined her journey. The famous pianist, now a silent observer of her growing recognition, reflected on the importance of humility and the value of genuine talent. He understood that learning does not stop with experience or fame, and that sometimes the most profound lessons come from unexpected sources. Her story had challenged his assumptions, humbled him, and reminded him that true artistry is about more than technique. It is about heart, honesty, and the courage to express oneself fully. As the months passed, she continued to perform, each time bringing the same honesty, passion, and dedication. She remained humble, never forgetting the journey that had led her to this point. The countless hours of practice, the quiet determination, and the courage to face doubt and judgment. Her story became a source of inspiration, not only for aspiring musicians but for anyone who had ever felt overlooked or underestimated. It was a testament to the power of passion, perseverance, and authenticity. The famous pianist occasionally watched her performances from a distance, silently appreciating the growth, confidence, and continued humility she displayed. He remembered the first time he had dismissed her, the smirk of arrogance that had now been replaced by admiration and respect. Her journey reminded him that greatness is not always about fame, recognition, or appearance, but about dedication, heart, and courage. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. In the end, the woman's story was not just about a single performance or a moment of astonishment. It was about courage, determination, and the power of authenticity. It was about stepping forward despite fear, trusting in oneself, and allowing passion to guide every action. Her music, her humility, and her bravery became a symbol of inspiration, touching hearts and minds in ways that would be remembered long after the applause had faded. The hall where she had first played continued to talk about her, and the story spread far beyond that single event. People everywhere admired not just her talent, but the strength of character and courage she displayed. She had faced judgment, ridicule, and doubt, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Her music had changed perceptions, inspired dreams, and reminded everyone that true greatness comes from the heart. As she looked back on that moment, she smiled quietly. She had begun with nothing more than love for music and a desire to share it. She had faced challenges and fear, and she had triumphed through honesty, courage, and dedication. The applause, the astonishment, and the recognition were meaningful, but the true reward had been the journey itself, the ability to stay true to herself and her passion. Her story had begun as a quiet hope and had grown into a testament to the power of heart, talent, and bravery. And that was a legacy worth more than any applause.